Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Fergo and the Freak. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRLP. And joining me is the glorious king of Rugby League, League Freak. You can find him on Twitter at League Freak. How are you today, mate?
I'm dying. I've got some sort of flu, but I had a good run. So, next episode will be the memorial podcast. Rest in peace, League Freak. But I've died before, so that's all fine.
We better pump a few out then.
Yeah.
And commiserations. I should put that in there as well.
Yeah, it's like I always remember when Top Gear they said that if any of them died, the plan was that in the next episode they go, well, and they just get on with it.
Yeah. So I like that approach.
To do. Yeah.
Well, speaking of death and misery, Greg Inglis retired during the week, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but some of the reports and the way some of it was talked about, and some of the highlight reels made it out like the poor bugger had passed away.
Yeah.
Yes, it's sad, no doubt about that. The bloke was an absolute beast of a player on the field, no doubt about that. We covered this in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose that we did find out that there was a new issue that come out of that, and that is the issue of his salary. And he's on quite a bit, and how South are going to manage to deal with that, and how I assume they got out of having to pay it out and having it included in the salary cap. Is that your understanding of it, mate?
Yeah, and I mean, he would be one of the highest paid players, and rightfully so. And the idea was that he basically said, look, because I'm stepping away, you don't have to pay me my salary. Which would normally happen if a player got a season-ending injury. They would get paid out for the rest of their contract, and their contract would count towards the cap because of that. And the idea is that Greg has said, look, I don't feel comfortable taking a salary when I'm not playing, and so I'm going to forfeit the rest of my contract for the rest of this year. And so that allows South to have $1 million+ that they can spend for the rest of this season. Now, one of the interesting things is that NRL clubs have to spend over a certain amount under their cap, so you can't have a team that only spends half the salary cap to save money. They have to spend a certain amount of money. I don't think that will kick in this instance, but what South Sydney now can do is they can spend $1 million. They might get one superstar player. They might get a couple of really good players. And what we're seeing is people are blowing up about that because they're saying, oh, well, how are they really going to pay Greg Inglis? How's he really going to get his money? Because it's so much money to leave on the table. And it's really starting to be a little bit messy because it's starting to say that there's something underhanded going on. And I don't like that. If there's some evidence of that happening, fair enough. But unless there's evidence of that happening, people need to just shut up.
Yeah, I think the only question I have is how much difference is what Inglis is getting out of this situation and what South are getting out of it, more importantly, to what the West Tigers were trying to do with Robbie Farah.
Yeah.
Because they agreed to some ambassadorial
situation there.
Yeah, and they sort of agreed to some ambassadorial role there to try and help, I suppose, deal with the fact that he was on a pretty high salary. Not as much now as he used to be, but the sort of their way of trying to repay him for a lot of the money that he took in pay cuts, I guess, over the years. But I suppose this foolish thing for the West Tigers, they came out and made it public and they tried to be honest about it. That's a no-no. You don't do that.
You don't be honest in rugby league. What the hell were they thinking?
Nowhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what the major differences are between the two incidents and why South are able to have this arrangement, which I must admit I don't think is a bad way of working it.
Yeah.
But I also, at the same time, understand the criticism that's copying at the same time because of some inherent inconsistencies with it, given what happened with Farah and the drama there and the implication that, the Tigers have now got their salary cap handicapped essentially for the next 2 years because of that.
Yeah. And I understand that. And the difference in this case, in my opinion, is that because Inglis is on so much money, like this isn't a few $100,000 here or there, it's probably well over $1 million. And I can't imagine that even South Sydney, with the good backing that they have, I can't imagine that they have the ability to say, well, look, we're going to bring in somebody on $1 million+ under the cap, and we're going to kind of find some way to pay Greg Inglis $1 million+, whether it be an ambassador role or something like that. I can't imagine that that's even a possibility for Souths. I guess my point of view is, and look, it might be a little bit naive, I accept that. As long as the NRL is fine with everything that's happening, I'm fine with it, and however they work it out. I can see where it could turn into a rort, and if the door is open even a little bit in that regard, every other team will kick it down. So the NRL has to be very careful about this. But I just think in this instance, and look, I would be cynical most times, but for so much money and the fact that Greg Inglis has been forced to retire and he has been on really good money for so long, I tend to think that this might actually be a case where Greg Inglis has actually said, look, I'm not going to take a salary, and South Sydney actually have the capacity to replace him under the cap. And look, I might be very naive about it, but that's the way I kind of feel about it.
Yeah, look, as I said, I understand the animosity towards what's happened, but at the same time, I think the NRL needs to be smarter about dealing with people who have become medically retired, because essentially, I don't think it's right that a player who becomes medically retired and physically cannot be playing anymore should have their salary from that point onwards included in the cap, because the club's not getting any benefit out of them, and they won't be getting any benefit out of them. That player is going to be done and dusted. Yeah. So I'm okay with the idea that this is not going to be liked, that the player gets paid out their contract as they normally would if they were playing outside of the cap. Yeah. And that would save the NRL having to get involved in any way. Perhaps they could broker a deal whereby the player gets paid at a reduced rate, or, like if, say, for example, Inglis gets a job with the Bunnies and he's earning $300,000 a year. Instead of paying him out, the rest of his contract and then giving a $300,000 job on top of that per year, just take that salary out of the payout. So he gets, if he had to get a payout of 1.5 and he's taking on a $300,000 job, just give him 1.2 and the $300,000 job. He's still getting his 1.5.
Yeah.
Try and reduce the impact that way, I guess, a little. But when it comes to players getting retired, and it's going to happen, as we've seen, horror injuries can happen at the drop of a hat, and these players are probably going to need a big chunk of money sometimes. I mean, Alex McKinnon's a good example.
Yeah.
And that big lump of cash getting handed to them up front could actually be very, very useful when they've got to go and have pretty important surgery or operations, or they've got to modify their lifestyles or the houses and stuff like that. And I don't think it's fair that the club should have to cop that and be impacted in future seasons because of an unfortunate accident that's retired a player. Yeah. So I wouldn't be opposed to the player having their contract paid out, and they make any arrangement they want with the player after that. They're not a player anymore. But
and it's not like South Sydney gets some sort of bonus by Greg Inglis not playing for them this year. It's that
bloody Greg Inglis.
Yeah, and it's not like they wanted this to happen. This is really unfortunate. And I think the other thing is too, as long as they're putting out a group of players in their squad is under a certain amount of money, I mean, Greg Inglis is not going to have any effect on what happens on the football field for the rest of the year. And if they can come to some sort of, if there are guidelines for this going forward, I've got no problems with it, as you say, as long as it can't be rorted, or that maybe it only happens, because I would guess that with certain size payouts, you would have to go through insurance. There'd be some sort of insurance element. Yeah. And I would be surprised if Greg Inglis' salary wasn't insured. As long as there's certain boxes that are ticked and the player is retired for forever, I agree with you. I don't see any problems with having the capacity to say, look, this player is retired now and we can't go forward. Even if it means even if it is only retirement's mid-season, you know, they have to have played games during the year and they literally cannot go on anymore. I don't really see the problem with it, but it has to be made so it's not a rort, that it's not a golden handshake on the way out. And I don't think this would be a golden handshake. And it seems like maybe that the golden handshake isn't there for Greg Inglis anyway. But as long as it's not turned into a way that clubs can give a golden handshake to a player, I've got no problems with it going forward.
Yeah, you don't want to be seeing players and clubs come to an agreement where the club knows the player's going to retire next year. And so the club says, look, we'll put you on a $1 million contract over 4 years and you retire in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
That's not on. So what I'd have is have the contract paid out for the current year they're in only. Even if they sign for 3 years, the other 2 years are just completely nulled.
Yeah.
Just written off, and they just pay out their contract for the current year, and what's paid out isn't included in the cap.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd have in the case of players like Inglis, so it can't be rorted by the club, is they can only bring in one player to replace him.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
So that way they're not sitting there going, right, we've just freed up $1 million. Let's bring in 3 players on $350,000 each or whatever, or $330,000 each, and we can bolster our depth and stuff like that, because I think that would be an unfair advantage. If they could only bring in one player, you're not going to get a massive benefit out of that. At best, you're going to replace like for like.
Yeah.
And you're not increasing your squad depth or anything like that. So you're not getting a too immediate advantage out of it. I think that's the best way to deal with that situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. At the moment, there's talk that Roberts might come from Brisbane down to the Rabbitohs. I don't know if that's the best idea. Roberts is a great player, but it seems like he's dealing with a few things at the moment, and I don't know that, you want him to be in a good environment. And he's been with a few Sydney clubs and it hasn't worked out. So there's him. I brought up the idea that maybe they would look at Israel Folau and have him as a replacement, but there's obviously a lot of things that need to happen between, now and potentially signing Folau for that to happen. And I know that Peter Beattie said that he wouldn't be welcome in rugby league. I think that, the ARL would fold on that as soon as the club started talking to Israel Folau and his management. But yeah, I like the idea that you would only be allowed to sign one player, because you wouldn't want South to be able to then go out and, cannibalise other clubs too much during the season. That wouldn't be, I don't think anyone would stand for that.
No, that was completely unfair. Yeah, I think they've got a lot of options they can look at. So, but knowing that they can only get one player, I think that makes them realise that they can't, there's no way you can rort that system there.
Yeah, and it's a massive commitment too. If you get someone like Roberts and say they were going to pay him even $900,000 a year, to think that, and look, some clubs might try and do it, but it would be very difficult for a club to be paying Inglis $1 million a year if there was some alleged rort going on, and Roberts $900,000 a year. I don't think most clubs would be willing to do that themselves.
That's right.
Okay, what else have we got on the agenda?
Right, well, we've got that lovely, splendid gentleman up in North Queensland, Josh Maguire. He got a bit friendly with one of the Cowboys' faces the other day. And managed, it looked to me like he was generally trying to do a bit of facial gardening.
Yeah, it didn't look good.
No, it was bloody ugly. And I come out and said, look, anyone who attempts to do eye gouging, whether they're successful at it or not, it's not something that you do accidentally when you go looking for someone's eyes with your hands. People's hands should not be on a player's face at any point in a game of rugby league. So I said that perhaps there needs to be an immediate, automatic, just pull the figure out of my backside, really. But I said maybe an automatic 10-week suspension and no pay for a player who attempts eye gouging, because you need to get the message across. And I always have this impression that punishments should also serve as deterrents. If you're going to give someone who earns 20 grand a month or whatever it is, or probably more than that, 50 grand a month, if you're going to give them a $3,500 fine for something like eye gouging, that's laughable.
Yeah.
That's laughable. Whereas if you said to that bloke, right, we're going to suspend you for 2.5 months, and that's going to be, 130 grand of money you don't get. Now you're starting to hit them where it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making a bolder statement then. And as soon as you say that, this is what the punishment's going to be going forward from now on. No one's going to be putting hands in their players' faces. Guaranteed. And someone actually raised a better idea to me, and that was perhaps you could suspend penalise them a percentage of their fee so that it's an equivalent number for every single player. So if someone who's on 100 grand a year, they're being penalised an equivalent figure. So that's also a good workable solution as well. But I think it needs to be something heavy and drastic, because that's shit behaviour and has no place in the game of football anywhere.
Yeah, and like there were people saying, that the two players are friends and stuff, and they said that the reason that the NRL didn't prosecute the offence was because it just happened to be outside of the camera angle, like when it happened, the exact moment that it happened. And I understand that, because it would be difficult for the judiciary to bring them in and say this happened. I think any good lawyer would be like, show me, But it's something that can't be allowed. And it's weird. It's one of those areas. There's two things in the game that are sort of a grey area, and that's when there's an offence like this, where a player needs to make an accusation about eye gouging, and it's similar when there's an accusation about biting incidences as well in the game. It's this weird extra thing within the game's disciplinary policies where you kind of need the player to come out. And I understand why you need a player to come out, because sometimes these things aren't seen in tackles, especially when it comes to biting incidents. But it's strange that we still have this in the game. And I just find it really strange that we still rely on a player to make the allegation that, I was bitten, or I was eye gouged, because, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me that we need to do that.
No, look, and I think, when you're dealing with things like eye gouging more than anything, there's just, it's so blatantly when someone's going to try and do it. You just don't need to have your hands there. And so it doesn't matter. That's what I get out is it doesn't matter whether he gets his hands in the eyes or not. Just don't put your hands in people's faces. I mean, you've only got to talk to players like Wayne Pearce to talk about the impact it has later on in life. Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because in the Parramatta Eels versus Canberra Raiders game, and Blake Ferguson got his nose badly broken. And throughout the game, the Raiders players, and look, if you ask me, it's fair game, they're all making sure that they put pressure on his face and on his nose during the game. And so you get an instance like that where, look, it's gamesmanship, and it goes back to rugby league being a tough sport where you're out there with busted nose, man. You better be prepared to get some attention. But then you get, am I wrong? Am I wrong with that?
No, look, I was going to say, I don't mind that approach when it's an area of the body that you're legally allowed to hit.
Yeah.
But when it's the face, I think it's a bit different. Like, I understand the reason why they did it. He chose to stay on. So part of me says he has to bear the brunt of those consequences, because he said, you know what, I'm going to stay on and keep playing. So, you're going to get targeted there. That's just a fact. But if it was someone who's playing on with a busted arm, like Sims was a couple of weeks ago, and players wanted to keep charging up and smash him in the arm even though it's completely busted, I mean, they don't know it's broken. That's fair game. It's a place of the body that you can legally hit. It may be a bit grubby, but, that's the way it is. I mean, players have been doing that since day one. Players taken to the field with a knee brace, so defenders will go out and tackle him on that same knee over and over again and hope that it'll buckle, It's always gone on. But I think just when it's the face, it's, you're not allowed to hit the face in the tackle or the head. I just think it should be one part of the body that's just sacrosanct. You can't go near.
And I think the NRL judiciary over the years has made it very, very clear that when it comes to your fingers, keep your fingers out of the eyes and keep your fingers away from the prostate. They're the two areas you cannot put your fingers in this game.
Yeah, they don't go in anywhere.
No. Any orifice, just keep them out.
Just keep them out. Keep your hands and your fingers to yourself, people.
Exactly.
Right, well, speaking of injuries...
Yes.
With a very poor segue there.
Yes.
We had quite a few bad ones over the last few weeks, including Nene McDonald, that horrible broken ankle. God, that looked bad.
Yeah, that was terrible.
And we had the issue where people were blowing up, and rightfully so, given what we found out later on with his injury, and even what you saw in the replay, about how the game continued to go on after he was down on the ground with his teammate. And the referee was in a position where he couldn't win because his job is to keep the game flowing. That's his directive. Yeah. And a system was brought in during the year which said if the play needs to stop, the team medico or the team officials need to contact the sideline official to get them to contact the referee. My problem with this is the referees, including the sideline officials, have to keep going with the play, which means they're a moving target. It's hard for the officials on the sideline for a club to speak to the sideline referee, and he's running down the field with the referee as well. So I had an idea where perhaps the medico who goes onto the field to treat the player initially to find out what the issue is, he should be mic'd up and so that he can talk directly with the bunker instead of having to go with sideline officials. And that way the bunker can immediately tell the referee, you need to stop the play, there's an issue.
Mm-hmm. And it also gets rid of... I mean, it's almost like a game of bloody Chinese whispers. It's like, you tell this person, you tell this person. By the time it gets down the line, the referee's saying, what? My car's on fire? I think that there needs to be something like that in place. And maybe if you bring in a rule where if that comes into effect and the referee does get asked to stop the game by a medical official, that player then either has to leave the field for even if it's like 10, 15 minutes or something like that, or they can't come back because then it can't be used as a tactic to slow down the game or stop the game if the opposition is attacking the line or something like that. There's definitely a better way to go around about it though, because there's too much for the ref to be doing. I mean, he's only a human being. You can't have him doing everything. As they're trying to referee the game, and then we also want them to have eyes in the back of their head and to be listening to the touchies and everyone. It's just too much for one person to take in. So I can't really blame the referee in that instance, but we do need some better system in place, that's for sure.
Yeah, the communication is the main thing there, and it's something that the referees rely heavily on now. And I think using some sort of archaic method of, sending some bloke to run after someone with a pigeon, you can send this message on to so-and-so. We don't need that when we've got so much technology in the game that can make things a lot more faster and better.
Yeah.
And my idea is to have the actual medic, not the trainer who runs out with the face washer and the bloody bucket of water. He's largely useless, but actually the actual medic who can actually tell when there's a genuine injury. He should be the one mic'd up to speak to the bunker or directly to the referee if need be, but something along that lines. Get rid of this whole chasing someone else to tell someone else caper, as you said. It's just, it's time wasting. That is in a wrong way because you want to get these players off the ground and treat it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and it's just refining a system that, let's be honest, works pretty well at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, this was an extreme scenario where the play was about 60 metres away. It was going in a different direction. I can understand where it was two players that were down together. It was a bit of a funny situation. And we saw other situations later on in the round where, players were down, in the Newcastle game, I think it was Guerrera was down on the ground and the play was coming towards him and the play was stopped. This has just been a funny situation, and it's really shown that there's maybe a little bit of a better way to do things, and anytime you can improve the game, let's do it.
Exactly, and the game's been pretty good at evolving and moving with decisions and stuff like that most of its career. So I've got confidence that the NRL will come up with a better system pretty quickly, and they'll sort that out pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess one more thing, which I've just thought of right now, which we didn't mention before starting the show, was I've produced some stats during the week about players aged 30 years or older in the NRL era. And I suppose it raised some questions about why the number has steadily increased. So just to give you a bit of a rundown, in 1998, 8.17% of the players were aged 30 years or older. And in 2010, that was the first time that the percentage hit 10%. It was 10.1.5%, and it's never gone backwards from there. This year, it's the highest it's been since 98, and that's at 16.5%. 0.57% of players are 30 years or older. And I thought it might be a good idea to probably look into why we think that number of players over 30 is increasing, and increasing at a pretty steady rate. It's never... These figures sort of wobble a little bit up and down, but it's constantly moving in an upwards direction overall trend-wise. So why do you think it's made that jump? And especially the last 2 years, it's jumped pretty significantly.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two things that jump out to me. I think the preparation and for players going into games and the medical facilities and everything that they have to use, their training methods, they're always being refined. So I think that you've got just that evolution of preparing players for what they have to go through in the game is better. Medicine is definitely better. So they're getting better medical treatment and things like that. And I think the last thing I would probably look at is the fact that because there's so much money in the sport right now, whereas in the past you might have got a player that could maybe play a couple of more years, but was maybe over it, was maybe over the grind and was looking to do something outside of football. These days, a lot of players, once they leave football, if they go into a different career, that career is not going to pay as much as rugby league does for them. And so there's maybe that incentive to stay in the game a lot longer because there's more money in the game these days. And I think that all comes together to see the march upwards for older players to stick around. And I also think that we've had some players stick around, and I think of Sivanasiva and Gallen, players that are at the extreme levels of being an older player in the NRL. I mean, you know, Steve Menzies was another one that played very, very late into his career. I always remember Stanley Jean over in the UK, and he was a 35-year-old player for about 15 years.
Yeah.
So there's been some players that are outliers. I mean, Cliff Lyons was another one who you could always have a joke about how old he was. But I think that, there's just a bunch of different things that come together, and I think it's something you'd probably see in a lot of different sports as well, where in the NFL you've got Tom Brady who's 40, and there's older players in the NFL these days, and I think it's just something that's generally happening across all sports, and for the same reasons as well.
Yeah, look, I was trying to figure out, and I probably should have done a bit more research before launching into it, I guess, but I was trying to figure out when the salary cap increases came along in the NRL, and I was wondering if the upward trends corresponded with increases in the salary cap.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there was one around 2010.
Yeah.
But we've had a few... The cap's been sort of increasing at a more rapid rate in the last decade than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking maybe that's part of the reason is they're getting paid better, but as they get older, they can take those pay cuts to keep playing, but they're still probably earning more than they would have done a year ago at the same age.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because I mean, with an extreme cap rise, and we've seen a couple of them over the last, say, 10 years, whereas once a star player was on $500,000, now you can be just a pretty good player and be on $500,000.
Exactly. So I think that might be a pretty important factor too. And a lot of clubs, because there's all the young players coming through, I think a lot of clubs are hanging on to these experienced players, knowing that they can give them a decent salary and not have to give them huge amount of playing time as well. So players like Paul Gallen, for example, is a good one because he's not playing 80 minutes a game anymore when he's on the field. He's playing, probably 45, 50 minutes a game, and he spends a bit of time on the bench, but he's helping the next generation get that start and get in there. And, experienced players have an awful lot of value to a club everywhere. They get to that age too where they stop thinking about what's best for them. They start thinking about what's best for the club, and they're thinking forward because they know that their career is pretty much over. So it's not about their legacy anymore. It's about trying to bring through the next crop of players and feel like you're achieving in a different area again, which I think is where Gallen's at the moment. And so I think there's other areas like that, and the one you spoke of about as well, which was the improvements in body science and diet and stuff like that, is massively as important as well as is treatment of injuries.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been surprised at the treatment for broken bones in a number of different sports, where the time frame for a player coming back seems to be getting shorter and shorter for that, and there's less issues. I mean, you think about when Mal Meninga for a long time, he was breaking his arm like all the time, the poor bugger. I feel like that the way that they treat broken bones these days is so much better than it used to be, and so the time frame, they're getting back quicker and they're having less complications as they play going forward. So that's definitely got to be factored into it. One of the things I would be interested to look at is when the NRL was going through a period where they were bringing player payments back down after the Super League war, I would bet that the number of older players were leaving the game because you couldn't carry those older players like you can now. And as you said, with someone like Gallen, you might be able to keep him on for a few $100,000, and I'm sure he's on more than that. But you could keep him on at the moment for a few $100,000 a year, knowing that he might miss a fair few games during the year, and you kind of want him to be around during finals time. And it's worth his while to stick around for that few $100,000 a year. Whereas back during the formation of the NRL in 1998, you just couldn't do that. You had to get rid of those players. And so I would like to see if the numbers drop down at around those times. And then they, as you said, they sped up again once we got to about 2010 when the salary cap started to rise.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. I mean, it's 2001, 2002 were the 2 years where the number of 30-year-old players were at their lowest.
Yeah.
And it was 5.8 and then 6.21%. And then after that, they hovered between 7 and 8% from 2003 to 2009. Yeah. And then just had that big 2% jump in 2010 and just slowly climbed up. 2017 was just on 12%, and 2018 was 14.5%, and 2019 16.5%. They're two big jumps.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it looks like it really does tell a bit of a story about where the salary cap was in a lot of ways, which is really interesting that you can line that statistic up with where the salary cap was.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating thing. I didn't expect the trend to be as obvious as it was when I put them out there. I thought it'd sort of stay around the same sort of figure the whole time, and I didn't expect it to be that pronounced and obvious a trend. So that was quite fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting. Far out.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you want to chat up, mate, that we haven't decided to talk about before that you think might be a good idea?
No, I think we've covered a few of the things. I mean, it's been a bit of a quiet week. Apart from the Inglis retirement, it's been a little bit of a quiet week. Really enjoyed the footy last week. And the thing I'm looking forward to this weekend is the opening of Parramatta Stadium, which I am more excited about than I really should be.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty fascinating. It sucks that we've got to wait till freaking Monday for it.
Yeah.
Because even though I'm down here and I've not seen much, obviously, than what's been put online, but I'm pretty keen to see how that ground looks when they've got a ton of people in there and they've got a bloody game on. I reckon it's going to have a pretty good sound about it too.
Oh, I think it's going to go off on Monday. I cannot wait. I'm probably more excited about that than anything this round. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to it so much.
And with any luck, the Tigers will rack up an absolute cricket score there.
We'll see.
Alrighty, well, we'll wrap up this episode and we will catch you all later.
Thanks. Oh, and where can they find us?
Oh, that's a good idea. Let's chuck that in there.
Yeah.
You can you can find League Freak on Twitter at League Freak. I'm on there at Andrew RLP. If you want to get in touch, drop us an email at podcast@leaguefreak.com. And I mean, absolutely, you can find the podcast absolutely everywhere now.
Yeah. So we've got everything now.
I found it the other day behind the lounge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's everywhere. I think the cat was chewing on it one day.
It's funny you say that because I was in the eastern suburbs of Sydney and I went into the boot of my car and I found it with a brown paper bag and it was full of money and the podcast was in there too. So it's very strange.
Pity the podcast didn't share the cash with us.
Yeah, that'd be handy.
It's already off and disowning us, the bastard.
Oh, man.
All right, well, on that note,
one last thing.
Go.
I need everybody to subscribe to the podcast on their podcasting app. And then, especially if you're on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating because that's really important for spreading the word and getting us on all the lists and things like that. So if you can do that, and if you send a picture to me of you having done that on Twitter, I will follow you automatically.
Bloody hell, that's a hell of an offer.
Yeah, that's all I can legally offer, by the way. There'll be other things that I'll do. I'll make it good for you.
Speaking of offers, if you want to sponsor the show or have some ads on here, we will sell out. You don't have to work hard on that. We will do whatever you want.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Well, I'm willing to go full Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. I will just draw the line at kissing on the lips because that makes me classy,
Yeah. You might be cheap, but you're not easy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I suppose for the third time, I'll see if I can wrap it up this time.
Yeah.
Anything else we can think of?
No, seriously, that's the end. That's all I've got.
Alrighty. I'm the same. Alrighty. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you later.
Bye-bye.